Finding love after 50. It felt like winning the lottery, didn't it? A second chance at a dream I thought was long gone. But what happens when that beautiful dream turns into a daily battle and the front line is your own family? One minute you're planning a future and the next you realize your adult children. Well, they can't stand the person you love. And just like that, you're caught in the middle. There's a special kind of sweetness to finding companionship later in life, isn't there? After the dust of a previous life settles, whether it's from loss or just going separate ways, the quiet can get, well, really loud. I vividly remember thinking that maybe that chapter of my life, the one with shared laughter over morning coffee, a knowing glance across a crowded room, was closed for good. And I'd kind of made my peace with that, or so I thought. Then Michael walked in. It wasn't the fireworks and drama you see in movies. It was easier than that. Comfortable. Like finding a favorite old sweater you thought you'd lost forever. He had his own stories, his own grown children, a whole life already lived. I had mine. We were both figuring out this new world of being single over 50, a landscape that looks a heck of a lot different than it did in our 20s. Our courtship, if you can even call it that at our age, was more of a gentle unfolding. Dinners where we'd talk for hours, finding shared values, and, just as importantly, a shared wish for a peaceful, joyful next chapter. Getting married wasn't a decision we took lightly. Turns out, remarrying after 50 is on the rise. And there we were, part of that hopeful, optimistic statistic. We talked about everything: our money, our dreams for retirement, and of course, our families. We both have adult kids, and we pictured a future where our families might not perfectly blend, but could at least get along, creating new, wider circles. You hear that saying for later life couples, the kids are grown and the dog is dead. Now it's our time. That really hit home. It truly felt like our time. The wedding was lovely, intimate. A celebration not just of us, but of new beginnings, filled with that quiet hope of two people who really got how precious a second chance can be. At first the signs were subtle. You know, a forced smile here, a phone call that ended a bit too abruptly there. My children, Sarah and Ben, had always been, well, my kids. Supportive, loving, even if they were a little set in their ways, as adult children often are. When I first told them about Michael, they were polite, cautiously optimistic maybe. Or perhaps, looking back, just cautiously reserved. The real shift happened after the wedding. It was like the legal commitment, Michael's solid place in my life, flipped a switch. Suddenly, politeness was out, and thinly veiled, sometimes not so thinly veiled, hostility was in. Sarah, my eldest, was the most direct. "I just don't understand why you needed to do this, Mom," she said, her voice tight. Dad hasn't been gone that long. It had been 5 years since their father passed away. I thought that was a respectable time to grieve. But grief, as I was quickly learning, doesn't follow a universal timetable, especially for adult kids who might feel like you're trying to erase the love you had for their deceased parent. Ben was quieter, but his disapproval came out as a kind of passive resistance. He'd suddenly have excuses to skip family gatherings if Michael was going to be there. He'd talk around Michael, never to him. His wife, bless her heart, tried her best to bridge the gap, but you could cut the discomfort with a knife. Then came the comments about Michael himself. "He just seems a bit opportunistic," Sarah casually dropped one day. That one stung, mainly because it was so far from the man I knew and loved. My children, who'd always trusted my judgment, suddenly saw me as naive, maybe even a bit foolish. I think they felt displaced, like Michael was taking something from them. My time, my attention, or maybe even, as I've read, their anticipated inheritance. The dream of a peacefully blended future was quickly turning into an emotional minefield. It seems adult children often get caught in what they call loyalty binds, feeling torn between their biological parent and the new partner. This wasn't just a subtle undercurrent anymore, it felt like a declared war. It's surprisingly common for adult children to react strongly when a parent remarries. They go through similar emotional adjustments as younger children dealing with loss, changes to their family identity, and all those established histories. Their family identity is so wrapped up in last names and past memories, and welcoming a new person can be a massive upheaval. Caught in the crossfire doesn't even begin to cover it. It felt more like I was the rope in a relentless tug of war. On one side, there was Michael, my new husband, a good man I loved, who was trying, in his own quiet way, to handle this unexpected hostility. On the other side were my children, basically extensions of my own heart, and their unhappiness was a constant ache for me. Holidays became a masterclass in anxiety management. Thanksgiving dinner felt like a carefully staged play, where everyone knew their lines of polite, surface-level chat, but the air was thick with unspoken resentment. Christmas was even worse. Sarah announced that she and her family would be spending it with her late father's side of the family. A tradition they hadn't bothered with in years. The message was loud and clear. Michael was not, and would never be, part of their family. The loyalty conflicts were just intense. My children seemed to feel that accepting Michael, or even just being civil to him, was a betrayal of their father's memory. And perhaps a betrayal of the family unit, as they'd always known it. I tried so hard to reassure them that my love for their father was still there, that new love doesn't erase old love. But those conversations often ended with them feeling unheard and me feeling completely helpless. I remember one gut-wrenching call with Ben when he said, "It just feels like you're trying to replace him, Mom, and you can't." I learned there's a term for what I was going through. A biological parent can feel torn between their kids' needs and those of their new spouse, a stuck insider. And my new spouse, in turn, can feel pushed out, like a stuck outsider. Michael, to his absolute credit, was incredibly patient, but I saw the toll it was taking on him. He'd retreat, become quieter, always careful not to intrude. Of course, this only made my children see him as distant or aloof. I was constantly trying to mediate, to smooth things over, to make everyone happy, which, let's be honest, is an impossible task. I'd spend time alone with my kids, telling them how much I loved them and how important they were, which I'd read was a good strategy. But then I'd go home to Michael, carrying the heavy weight of their unhappiness, which always cast a shadow over our new life together. The joy of finding love again was being slowly eaten away by this constant, draining conflict. It's important to acknowledge your adult children's feelings, to understand they might be grieving or feeling torn. But acknowledging those feelings doesn't always mean you can fix them. Just when I thought the emotional battlefield couldn't get any more complicated, the whole step-sibling dynamic tossed in a few more landmines. Michael has 2 adult children, Mark and Emily. Unlike my kids, they seemed pretty indifferent to our marriage. They were polite, a little distant, maybe, but not openly hostile. They lived further away, had their own busy lives, and perhaps, since they'd already navigated their parents' divorce years ago, they were more used to new family setups. The real problems popped up when we tried to create any kind of blended family event. My children, Sarah and Ben, looked at Mark and Emily with outright suspicion, like they were the enemy's spies. There was no natural warmth, no easy conversation. It was just awkward, stilted, and deeply uncomfortable for everyone. My adult kids suddenly had step-siblings, and that wasn't as simple as it sounded. It seems young adults often feel they don't need new parents, or, by extension, new siblings. I remember one particularly disastrous attempt at a joint birthday celebration for Michael. Sarah barely spoke a word to Mark, and Ben spent most of the evening glued to his phone. Emily, bless her, tried to chat with my kids, but all she got were one-word answers. Michael and I exchanged these pained glances over the birthday cake. It was crystal clear. This wasn't just about my children disliking my new spouse. It was about them rejecting the entire new family structure, step-siblings and all. This just piled another layer onto my guilt and Michael's discomfort. His children, while not overly invested, were at least willing to make a bit of an effort. Mine weren't. It created this imbalance, a subtle feeling of, well, unfairness. The shifting of family traditions can be really tough for adult children. Holidays, which for decades had been celebrated in certain ways, were now loaded with tension about who to include, whose traditions to follow, and how to manage all the clashing expectations. I've read that adult stepchildren often face similar emotional adjustments to younger children dealing with loss and change. Their family identity is so closely tied to their history, and new step-siblings can feel like an unwelcome intrusion into that story they know. For my children, Mark and Emily weren't just Michael's kids. They were symbols of how their family had changed forever, a change they hadn't asked for and definitely didn't want. Even when children are adults, differing expectations about how much step-parents and step-siblings should be involved can create a lot of tension. No marriage lives in a bubble, and ours was certainly no different. The constant tension with my children started to seep into the very foundations of my relationship with Michael, really testing the vows we'd made with so much hope. It's a tough pill to swallow, but I'd read that the biggest predictor of a remarriage failing is the presence of children from a previous relationship, whether they're young or adults. That statistic really weighed on my mind. Michael, like I said, was patient, but he's only human. There were evenings when the silence between us was heavy with unspoken frustrations. He never directly blamed me, but how could he not feel the sting of being so thoroughly rejected by my children? He'd chosen me, and, by doing so, had unintentionally signed up for a family that treated him like an unwelcome guest. I watched him try. He'd suggest outings, remember their birthdays, ask about their lives, only to be met with lukewarm responses or just outright avoidance. The joy we'd found in each other started to feel incredibly fragile. Our home, which should have been our sanctuary, often felt more like a waiting room for the next emotional blow-up. I found myself constantly apologizing to Michael for my children's behavior, which made me feel disloyal to everyone. And I could see the worry in his eyes. Was this going to be our future? A lifetime of tiptoeing through this minefield? We had conversations, of course. Lots of late-night talks filled with, I just don't know what else to do, and this isn't what I imagined. We tried to present a united front, which I knew was important, but it's hard to feel united when the attacks are so personal and so relentless, mainly aimed at one person, but deeply affecting us both. Differences in how to handle the children, or how much to push for their acceptance, sometimes cause friction between us. I tended to want to give them space, hoping they'd come around. Michael sometimes felt we should be more assertive in expecting respectful behavior. Financial worries, which can often be an issue in later life remarriages, also subtly played a part. My children's unspoken anxieties about inheritance sometimes felt like a hidden layer to their disapproval, adding another level of stress. The strain was immense. It wasn't just about my kids not liking Michael. It felt like they were actively trying to undermine our happiness. And there were days, I have to confess, when I wondered if they'd actually succeed. The happiness I'd found felt like it was constantly under siege, and the effort to protect it, while also protecting my relationship with my children, was just exhausting. That question, what now, became a constant loop in my mind. This couldn't be our forever. The emotional toll was just too high, for me, for Michael, and yes, even for my children, who despite all their anger, clearly weren't happy either. Our first real step was to try and have some honest, open conversations. Separately, and then together. I sat down with Sarah and Ben one-on-one, trying to get to the root of their feelings, to really listen without jumping to my own defense. Something I'd read was often advised. I acknowledged their grief for their father, their feelings of being displaced, those loyalty binds. These conversations were tough, often going in circles, but tiny glimmers of understanding sometimes poked through. Sarah admitted she was scared of losing me, not just to Michael, but to a new life that didn't seem to include her in the same way. Ben confessed he felt like their father was being forgotten. Michael and I also looked for advice. We read articles, talked to friends who'd been through similar blended family challenges, and even thought about family therapy. Therapy is often suggested as a way to ease tensions and navigate these complicated step-family dynamics. While we didn't take that step formally as a whole group because the kids were resistant, Michael and I found it really helpful to talk to a counselor ourselves. It gave us strategies for managing our own stress and for communicating more effectively with my children. One of the biggest things I learned was how important it is to set boundaries. As much as I wanted to validate my children's feelings, I also had to make it clear that disrespect towards Michael or towards our marriage just wasn't acceptable. This was incredibly hard to do. It sometimes meant ending a phone call or saying, very calmly, "I understand you're upset, but I need you to speak to Michael with respect, or we can't continue this conversation." This didn't magically fix everything, but it did start to shift the dynamic, just a little. My children needed to understand that while their feelings were acknowledged, their behavior had consequences. We also learned to pick our battles. Not every sigh or eye roll needed to turn into a big confrontation. We focused on small, positive interactions whenever we could, even if they were short-lived. I came across Ron Deal, a specialist in blended families, who advises that the goal for step-parents of adult children is often just to be friends, to take small steps towards friendship without forcing anything. Michael really took that to heart. He'd offer kindness without expecting a big show of reciprocation. He'd send an article Ben might find interesting, or compliment Sarah on a work achievement he'd heard about. Tiny gestures, hoping to build a bridge, one fragile plank at a time. Patience became our mantra. I learned that it can take 2 to 5 years, or even longer, for blended families to really adjust and for relationships to settle. We had to accept that this wasn't going to be a quick fix. We started creating some new traditions, just Michael and I, to build our own shared history and joy, separate from all the family conflict. And we made a real effort to spend one-on-one time with my children, to reassure them of their continued importance in my life. It's definitely an ongoing process. There are still bad days, awkward silences, and moments of deep sadness. But there are also small victories, a slightly longer phone call, a less strained family dinner, a grudging admission from Sarah that Michael isn't all bad. The what now is about keeping those lines of communication open, setting boundaries, being patient, and holding on to the love that brought Michael and me together in the first place, nurturing it like an anchor in this stormy sea. What Michael and I are going through, this tangled web of love, loyalty, and resentment, is far from unique. The whole landscape of family is changing. Divorce rates for people over 50 have been going up, and so has remarriage in this age group. This means more and more of us are trying to figure out how to blend families when the children are already adults. And from what I've gathered, adult children can have just as strong, if not stronger, reactions than younger kids. Several things make these later life blended families particularly tricky. Adult children have much longer histories and more established family dynamics. They've had years, often decades, of their family looking and working a certain way. Bringing in a new step-parent and possibly new step-siblings can feel incredibly disruptive to their deep-seated idea of what family is. Loyalty conflicts are a massive piece of this puzzle. Adult children might feel like they're betraying a deceased parent, or the parent who isn't remarrying by accepting a new step-parent. It can be hard for them to see their parent being affectionate with someone new, feeling it somehow lessens the memory or importance of their other biological parent. This isn't always logical, but it's a very powerful emotional response. Then there are the practical things that often come up with adult children, worries about estate planning and inheritance. It's an uncomfortable truth, but anxieties about how a new marriage will affect their financial future or how family assets will be divided can definitely fuel resentment towards the new spouse. My children haven't said this outright, but I've often wondered if it's an undercurrent to their feelings. The role of the step-parent to adult children is also just naturally unclear. You're not there to parent them in the traditional sense. They're adults, often with their own families. The best approach, from what many experts suggest, is to aim for friendship and respect, rather than trying to force a parental bond that might never happen. This takes huge amounts of patience and a willingness from the step-parent to let the relationship develop naturally, if it develops at all. I've also read that stepmothers, in particular, might have a tougher time. Some studies show that adult stepchildren often report feeling less close to stepmothers and might be less happy about their father remarrying than their mother. A stepmother can sometimes become a kind of lightning rod for the children's unhappiness about their parents' divorce or the death of their mother, no matter how the previous relationship ended. It's also so important for the parent in my shoes, the biological parent, to work as a team with their new spouse. Setting boundaries early on and making sure adult children treat the new step-parent with basic courtesy is vital, even if deep affection isn't there. Open communication, not just with the children, but especially between the remarried couple, is key to navigating these choppy waters. And for everyone involved, understanding that adjustment takes time, often years, can help manage expectations and cut down on frustration. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, needing endurance, empathy, and a whole lot of grace. This journey has been, well, it's been a lot. And I know I'm not the only one walking this incredibly challenging path. If you've experienced something similar, if your adult children have struggled to accept your new partner, or if you're an adult child who's had a hard time with a parent's remarriage, I'd genuinely love to hear your story in the comments below. What helped you? What did you learn? What are you still struggling with? Sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes the biggest difference, doesn't it? And please, if this story resonated with you, consider liking this video and subscribing for more conversations about navigating life and love after 50. Your support truly means the world. So, where do we stand now, Michael and I, with all the lingering echoes of disapproval and those fragile little shoots of potential understanding? We're still here. Our love, though it's been seriously tested, remains. Some days are definitely harder than others. There are still family events that feel a bit awkward, still conversations I wish would go differently. But there's also this quiet resilience that has grown between us. We've learned to lean on each other, to find joy in our shared life, even when everything around us feels turbulent. We've learned that we absolutely cannot control our adult children's feelings or choices, but we can control our own responses, our own commitment to our marriage, and our own happiness. My hope isn't for some picture-perfect blended family anymore. Perhaps that was a naive dream to begin with. My hope now is for respect, for a peaceful coexistence, and maybe, just maybe, for a gradual thawing of hearts. I hope my children will one day see Michael not as a replacement or an intruder, but as the man who makes their mother happy, who brings her companionship and love in this chapter of her life. I read somewhere, and it really stuck with me, that it's important to leave the door open for your children, to reassure them of your unconditional love, even if you're disappointed in how they're acting right now. For anyone else navigating this, my heart really goes out to you. It's a complex, painful situation with no easy answers. Be kind to yourself. Communicate relentlessly with your partner. Acknowledge your children's feelings, even when they're incredibly hard to hear. But don't let those feelings dictate your life or your right to happiness. It's about finding a balance, however precarious it might feel, between the love you have for your children and the love you found for your partner. And holding on to the hope that, with time and patience, peace really can be found. Thank you for listening.